shared. We are ready to go.
Yeah, we can get started.
Yeah. Yeah, Samiksha, you can start now.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon to one and all present in this virtual online webinar on career opportunities in IT industry. On this auspicious August gathering, I, Samiksha Hankare, student coordinator of IEEE student branch of ADCT Ashta, would like to welcome Honorable Executive Director Shri Jnaneshwar Shikshan Sanstha Islampur, Professor R.A. Kanai, sir. Welcome, sir. I welcome the director of our ADCET, Dr. Vikram Patil, sir. Welcome you, sir. I take this opportunity to welcome the head of CSE department, Dr. Smriti Bhandari, madam. Welcome you, madam. I am very excited to welcome the resource person of today's webinar, Mr. Sudhakar Shenoy, Senior Engineering Manager, Proxima System, Pune. Welcome you, sir. I welcome all the deans, faculty members of our ADCET Ashta. Last but not the least, I heartily welcome all the participants of this webinar. Welcome all the present members. So, Mr. Sudhakar Shenoy, he is completed his BE Computer Science and Engineering in Walchand College of Engineering, Sangli, batch 2000 year, batch 2000. He is also completed his MS in Software Systems at Birla Institute of Technology and Science. Mr. Sudhakar started his professional career as project engineer, software engineer with Control Network Private Limited through campus placement in 2000 itself. Work in various roles with organizations like HCL Technologies, Chennai, Mozo Networks, Pune. Work with persistent systems for 11 years in roles like project lead, project manager, senior manager. He worked as senior technical manager with Calsoft Private Limited, Pune for 3 years. He has a vast experience in the domains such as networking, cloud, storage, and virtualization. He is a master in programming language such as C, C++, Java, Python, Golang, front-end technologies such as Angular and React. Currently, he is working as Senior Engineering Manager in Proxima Systems, Pune. With the brief bio sketch, I present you the eminent personality, Mr. Sudhakar Shenoy, sir. Sir, please start your session. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Samiksha. Thanks for the introduction. So I hope you guys can hear me okay, right? Hello?
Yes, sir.
You can hear me and you can see the presentation as well, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think with that out of the way, let's get started with the presentation. So I put together a few slides based on what I felt would be good for you guys to know. I believe there is already a couple of sessions happened which gave you enough background of what kind of different work that happens in the industry. So I thought maybe I'll take one specific area out of that since this industry is pretty vast. Some of the things that I thought I should cover is specific to cloud computing, which is, I think you can take any applications. Eventually, it has to be deployed in some infrastructure, and cloud is something which has been there for a while now, and it is going to remain there as it is. So it is important for all of you to get some flavor of what exists already, and that will help you plan your things accordingly. So I chose this topic and I'll try to cover some of the technical aspects of this. This is the agenda that I put together. We'll briefly look at what is cloud computing. We'll also look at what are various options that are available. Then we'll talk also about what are different career opportunities that exist in cloud as such specifically. And at the end, we can do a question and answer. Although I put question and answer at the end, feel free to stop me and ask any of the doubts that you may have. But it would be good if you could keep all your questions together at the end so that some of those things might get answered during the presentation. So that's the only reason, but don't hesitate to stop me if you feel that something is not clear and it's better to be getting clarified in the flow. Okay. So yeah, so you can look at any software. So any software is typically created to solve a problem. If it is not solving a problem, then then the software shouldn't exist other than because it's of no use. And for any problem, to find a solution, there are two aspects to the solution. One is the business aspect, business domain. The second is the technology. So business domain will help you understand what is a problem talking about, what are the possible solutions that exist for the problem, and then technology will help you get to that solution. It will provide all the necessary tools to resolve that problem, and that's how any software comes into existence. That is typically to solve a problem. So when the software application started, all these applications started as a standalone application. That is, an application would be installed on your machine or any server where it is required, and people would then start using it. But what it means is like the performance of an application will be dependent by the hardware platform. If tomorrow there are a lot many users for that, then I can't scale that because it is limited by the hardware. Secondly, all of this software had to be installed individually at each server. Say, for example, if I'm installing Office, I will go on each of the machines in the lab and I have to install that so that it will be made available. That's how initially the application started, but it quickly ran into the issues like scalability, performance, and all of that. So the next level of application, then people thought that, OK, instead of that, what we can do it is like we can move to a client server side kind of architecture, wherein we would have a centralized server. Everybody would you have clients installed on their local machines, and using those clients, they can connect to the server and make use of those facilities or the software that they want to use. It solved the problem to an extent, but still there was still it did not it did not completely resolve this. So that's when the people kind of thought of looking at how this model can be scaled further so that people's life can be made easier. Because right now with this model as well, people have to spend a lot of time into provisioning the hardware, doing the IT part, taking care of the electricity part, the uh, cooling and all other factors which are not core to the application. The software is basically to resolve the issues and not look at all these periphery things that have come up with this. So that's when people started looking at removing this extra part. If there is somebody who can take care of these parts, and developers can focus primarily on the solution, and that's when the kind of cloud came into existence. uh, Cloud doesn't mean that it runs somewhere in the somewhere in the air. It needs the physical hardware. It needs physical infrastructure, storage, networking, compute, CPU, all the thing that we talk about in a local server, everything that is required even in the cloud. It just that it is not bound to a specific server instance or a specific location. All the developer has to care is that, OK, this is my input, this is what I want the cloud service to do it, and it will do it on its own without you being knowing where exactly it is being worked upon. That's what is use of a cloud, and that's where majority of the services that are built are hosted in the cloud. So this is what we call it as a cloud hosted applications, wherein you kind of develop a software in some local thing and then it gets deployed into a cloud environment. It gets executed there. So you don't have to worry about installing the OS, installing the patches to your OS, installing the antivirus or any of the other software that you want to have, upgrading those things as and when required. That's all taken care. You focus on the primary function of resolving the writing the code and deploying the code to the cloud infrastructure, and it will take care of its own. This is where you have the flexibility of and the second part of that is like you can scale up and scale down this infrastructure as and when you need it. So it's say for your building a website, if you expect that there will be a lot of load for some reason, you kind of scale your infrastructure within minutes or within a factor of seconds or minutes, the infrastructure will be scaled. At some point in time, you feel that you don't need those many infrastructure, you can scale it down as per your need as well. So this is like instead of buying the entire hardware, you are kind of renting it. It comes with its own benefits as well as drawbacks, and we can think of it as like I can control what I do in my house, but I cannot do the same thing when I've rented this place, or I can live with whatever is provided. I cannot add more features because that's currently not supported, even though my application would need it. So those kind of factors come into when you kind of develop this application. And the latest part of this cloud journey is the cloud native application, wherein you kind of don't write the code from scratch. You kind of make use of services that are already there, provided by these cloud vendors, and you kind of use those services and you get your uh, business workflow. Say, for example, if you are creating an application which needs AI, you need a training of a model, and you need all of that. So you can get models that are trained in the cloud, and then you can use it. There is a lot of infrastructure that is required to train a particular model. So each user may not have that infrastructure, but what you do it is like you kind of leave that to the cloud vendor that you have and make use of those services, and you kind of focus on what is your problem statement that you want to solve. And say, for example, I want to check how many cars are speeding, or what is the number plate of that car, how many people are wearing masks, or those kind of use cases. You focus on that, but the part of the training of the image processing and all that, you kind of leave that to the cloud infrastructure. The only drawback in that is like there is a vendor locking. That means once your application has got it gets kind of it gets popular, and you are too much dependent on the vendor to provide you those facilities. You cannot move to another vendor because, and whatever pricing that they will have, you probably have to still live with it. So those are the drawbacks that typically come with cloud native, but you also always have to think about uh, what are the benefits versus drawback for whatever decision that I'm making. So that will give you what is a desired way to move forward, and what is your requirement. Do you want to quickly get the solution out in the market, or you want to spend some time and you can wait for that to get a perfect solution? So those are the drawbacks that you kind of have to make when you make these choices. But if you see, essentially cloud has become an part of this industry. You can take any domain, any of the domains you might have went through yesterday, I think, retail, or you can say energy, for telecom, or anything that you take. You will develop applications, but at the end of the day, it will be hosted in the cloud. So it's important for you to understand what are the options that are available, what am I getting into when I say I want to develop an application in the cloud. What are the benefits, what are the things that I have to be worrying about. Say, for example, if you see that AWS is offering a free tier for, I think, entry level instance, but it's not really free. Nobody will offer you freebies. There will be some cost. It's only for a limited period. The costing is based on the number of IOs, the number of network bandwidth that you use, the number of cores CPU. So you have to be really careful. You have to keep a watch on what is your usage. Those will give you enough thing whether it makes sense to move your application to the cloud, or whether you want to host it in your private data center. So those are the factors that you have to be aware of to make sure that before you take any kind of decision, so that your decision is like a educated one and not a guessed one. It's just because somebody provided me a facility, I'll just make use of it. So those are the factors that I feel you guys should be aware, that will help you understand and plan your things better. Although at your level, you may not be making those calls, but just having an awareness is good, probably, which will help you in your career further. Okay. So in terms of features for any cloud platform, it has to be highly available. What do I mean by that is like, because these applications are executed in some cloud, in some location which you are not aware of, there has to be zero downtime. That means anybody around the world will be making use of your application, and it cannot go down just because an hardware failed in the, that does not mean my application has to go down. And in case of the on-prem that servers that you may have under your control, where you know that okay, this sort hardware I need to replace, or I need to add more CPU, or I need to add more RAM to this machine, you don't have control over there. But that's the reason there are SLAs that are defined. And one of the SLAs is like the service that you're consuming will always be available. And it also comes up with things like replication across the region. So each of these cloud providers have the data centers distributed across the world, and each of these are called as region or availability zones. Say one availability zone in like India, maybe there is one data center in Hyderabad, other in Mumbai, there other in Chennai, so that they are differently they are located in different geographies. So any time if there is any natural calamity, it is the impact is limited. It's not, it won't happen that the entire country will be under some kind of a calamity and you will have an outage. Even in that case, you can have the data centers at different countries, different geographies, and that will give you enough availability and resilience against any kind of failures. There are failures that happen localized, that probably a server within a data center will go down. And there are technologies in place which will make sure that whatever instance you are running on one server will be auto migrated to a different healthy server and your work will not be impacted. I think those are the features that help this cloud service, and that those are the factors come into picture whenever you make choice of which cloud provider to go with. The other is scalability, which we talked about. I should be able to scale up and down whatever infrastructure that I'm requesting within a matter of minutes, if not seconds. That will help me make sure that my business impact and outages are low, and I can always scale my business and I don't have to worry about infrastructure, whether my infra will scale up in time or not. So that's another factor that you have to consider when you choose a cloud platform for deploying any of your application. And the third is like last, as you would expect, I don't want to pay for something which I'm not using. Say for example, if I provision an instance and I don't see a traffic, I don't need to keep it running just for the sake of it. So I can shut it down and I can spawn it whenever I need it. And say similarly, for example, I want to use some APIs. I don't want to pay for APIs which I'm not calling. I would prefer that I would only pay certain things, which certain part of the services which I'm consuming, I will only pay for that. That's one of the factors, critical factors when it comes to providing a service in a cloud platform. So that's how the cloud platforms are also provisioned. Like if you say I want to provision these many cores, and once I provision it, I have these many IOPS I will do, these many IOs will happen on the on my instance, you will be charged accordingly. Up if as long as you, let's say for example, image processing, there will be plans like okay, I would process first 500 images for free. There will be a some kind of next 1,000 images will cost me like $50, and anything beyond that will cost me like $20. There are different plans, but those are based on usages. I don't want to pay upfront that because I don't know what kind of traffic I would be seeing, and that's how the plans are structured. You can get into an agreement with these cloud providers and you can customize the plans according to your usages, and that will help benefit you in kind if you're kind of partners with any of these cloud providers, but those facilities are available. So you pay only for something which you are using, and that's the critical factor when it comes to that. So that's a feature which if you are creating a service, you should also keep in mind that okay, people would tend to use it, your service in that way. They would prefer that they will pay only for that subscription based model. So if you're at some point you are thinking of developing any service, try to factor that in while you're developing, because it's easier to meter your service while it is in development rather than adding it as a fallback or adding this feature as a later point in time. So in terms of cloud models, there are primarily three models that exist. One is public cloud. That means you will deploy your application completely in the public cloud vendors like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, or any of the vendors. But what comes there is like there is no control, as in your application will reside next to an application who might be of your competitor. So you don't have any control over there, because all you do it is like you take your subscription from AWS and it will deploy your application wherever it wants. So you have to make sure that your application is well secured and all of that, so that it is going to reside along with other applications as well. So if certain application is written in a different way, in malformed way, it might impact your application as well. So you have to be very careful. The second factor that comes into picture is some of the domains like insurance, banking. It is not allowed for them to store the data outside certain country boundaries or region boundaries, and they cannot store it outside their premise, as in their control as well. So in those applications, typically they would create their own data center and they would host their applications there. That's, we call it as private cloud. And the third is a hybrid, wherein we kind of store user critical data in the private cloud, whereas we also make use of certain things which are not that critical. Those can be deployed into hybrid cloud in the public cloud. So that's what the third model, what we call it as a hybrid cloud. So all the three models exist depending on your use case and what kind of applications you're working on. That's how the decisions are made, whether you go for a public cloud deployment or whether you go for your private cloud, or a hybrid model is better for you. At the same time, you have to make sure that data security and privacy are taken care, and those factors, even though we are not that we feel that those are not critical, but for any enterprise application, those factors are definitely of huge importance, and there are litigations that you may get into. So that's why you have to be very serious about anything that you deploy or in the cloud, specifically public cloud, and what kind of accesses are provided, those kind of things. So if you look at broadly the cloud offerings that are there are, I would say at a high level, three kind of things that we see. First, at the bottom is the infrastructure as a cloud, which means the cloud provider will provide you only
Explain in Marathi, sir.
Hello? Hello?
Explain, sir, मराठी मध्ये करा sir.
Which part?
Each part.
That will be a bit difficult for me to explain in Marathi. Is there any specific part that you are not, you haven't understood?
Hindi, sir, Hindi.
Sir, you please continue in English. Madam, we have a medium of instruction as English. Please understand. Please continue, sir.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so infrastructure as a service, as in if you see any of the servers, the core things that are required for any server are the compute, networking, and storage. So these providers like AWS, Azure, they will give you bare minimum platform. You can specify what kind of instance you want, what is the CPU cores, how many CPU cores you want, what is your memory that you want, what is the storage capacity you want, what type of file system, what are the networking that you want, what is the speed and all that. So they provide only that. So you can choose based on whatever need you feel, and that's where it stops. You don't, anything that is required beyond like installing of OS, you can get AMIs for any operating system like Linux or any flavors of Linux, Windows or anything, but you will get that and you can install it. But anything beyond that for your application servers, you will have to install it yourself and you can configure it as per your need. You get better control in that environment, and all this is typically used by your network architects, IT admins. They will create all the instances, all the infrastructure that is required, and you take that infra and deploy your application on top of it. The next layer is platform as a service. This is where a lot of software developers will be using. This is like, you can say, they will, a cloud platform will build APIs and services, and they will expose them as a service. And you can consume these services, and primarily these services are like REST API based. So you can build your application by consuming these APIs, calling these APIs, and then getting their response and creating a workflows by calling various set of APIs, and you stitch together your application. So things like Salesforce and these platform service providers will provide you all the necessary building blocks. So any application typically would need logging infrastructure. They may want to use like file IOs. They may want to use something which can tell me metrics. So I want to see graphs. I want to see some kind of a UI element, widgets. They will provide you all of that, and all you then worry, or all you then do it is like stitching together the parts and creating the application. So that is the platform as a service. So now if you see, AWS started as infrastructure as a service, but now if you look at AWS offering, you will see applications, all the services all across the spectrum of any of the domain that you can see. There are ML, IoT, data analytics, or anything that you see, you will have that Kubernetes, then Docker. All these things are available. So now slowly even AWS is moving towards platform as a service. You can build your application without worrying about how it is done. You will have database service available for you. You will have, and that database service also contains your SQL, NoSQL, any type of database, Postgres or MS SQL, MySQL, MariaDB, anything. So those things are available. All you worry is like your business logic, and as long as you understand your business domain and you understand what kind of API I need to have, you can create your application using all of that. And the third type of thing is the service software as a service, which is SaaS. The example is like Office 365. So everybody probably have a subscription of Office 365, which is not installed anywhere. All you do it is like consume it. These are all end users who will consume these things, like your Gmail. There are offerings which the enterprises will use Gmail from the Google, and they will create all. They don't need to have email client, email server installed on any of their servers. Everything is taken care by Gmail, and that's the software as a service model. And the pricing differs based on what kind of model you have, and these all providers have to offer the pricing has to be attractive. So you have different kind of pricing model that you see. One is like maybe a free tier, which comes up with some limitations. There are some enterprise licenses which comes up with more security, more features, and those kind of things. And then you kind of have like exclusive support, wherein at any point in time you kind of run into issues, there will be a support available 24/7 for all this software. So there are different factors that come with this, and those are the things you kind of take into account whenever you kind of buy in these subscription or the accounts with any of these cloud service providers. Okay, so now we look at what are different cloud service providers, or what does cloud offer. In terms of service providers, everybody might have heard about Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, but there are others as well who are available, and you have to carefully examine what are the things that you want, what is your application need, and there are the factors like Heroku, DigitalOcean. They also have a very attractive price proposition. So if you are not looking for a feature-rich service, you can consider any of the other providers as well. They are not as feature-rich as AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure, but not every application would need that. So you also always have to make sure that you know what trying to do. That will give you. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, Sudhakar, you please continue. Please continue.
Yes, sir.
No problem.
Yeah, okay. So these are the other options that are available. So you carefully evaluate what options that you are looking for, and then you can make your choice. Okay. Uh, in terms of career opportunities, majority of the people would be working on application development, and in the application development, uh, there are factors like front-end application development. The technologies that are I have put a technology stack which includes your Angular, React, Vue.js. These are all front-end frameworks, whereas JavaScript, jQuery, Bootstrap, HTML5, CSS3, these are all things which you would need to make use of this. In terms of backend, there are different languages, Node.js, Python, Java, .NET, Golang, or any of the other things. But with microservices, you can choose different languages. Your entire application need not be built in a single language, as long as it provides a consistent interface to the front end or the consumers of your backend. You can build one part of your application or one service in Node.js, whereas other service can be a Python, other service can be a Golang. Say, for example, if uh, an image processing or ML, I have a better support in Python. I did not build my entire application in Python just because one part of my application needs ML. So I can build that in Python. I can expose that as a REST API to the other parts of the application, and I can build the other services in other languages like Python or Golang or anything which I feel the developers that kind of developer that I have available with me, or the expertise that I have available internally within the organization. That way I'm not bound by a single language or a platform. And in the persistent layer, I would typically use databases, which can be a SQL database or a NoSQL database, depending on what kind of data I'm storing. And lastly, the testing, which can include the manual and test automation. This is a typical opportunity that you might already be aware of, uh, but and these are not cloud specific. These are like application development. But with the cloud, the other set of opportunities that comes with that, first is a DevOps, which basically means anything that I need to take this application. The developers would typically write the code and check in their code into the repositories. But the DevOps team would typically pick up this code, create Docker containers, create kind of pipelines, uh, take the automated script which are developed by the testing team, uh, create a build out of it, deploy that particular thing in a development environment, run the automated script and give me a result. So earlier the entire product development and release cycle was like used to run in years. But now if you see all the applications, they can have multiple releases even within a single day. So what helps this is like the tools that gives you all the automated end-to-end thing. Like whenever a developer checks in his code, the build will be triggered automatically. The automated test script will be triggered once the build is successful. It gets deployed. It get the test scripts run against them. If the test pass, that test will the entire build can then be deployed to staging environment, production environment, and on all of this. And all this pipeline can be configured programmatically, and you don't need any manual intervention for that. And there are tools, and all these tools are like uh, open source. You don't need any licensing for that. The tools like Jenkins, CircleCI, Ansible, all of them come with that, and you don't need to be like extremely good in coding, but at least some kind of knowledge of, okay, if I pass this, this is what it will do. It will take this kind of input. I want to transform this XML into the other format or do it into JSON. what do I need to do? So that kind of acumen is required, although you don't have to be extremely thorough like the data structures and all of that. It may not be required to that extent, but you can always do kind of a scripting and coding, and these tools are available in Python, Shell script, PowerShell, or any of the other things. The next aspect is the SecOps, which is the security operations. As I said, all these applications will be deployed in the cloud. So you have to make sure that you don't open up all the ports to the outside world. You don't know where your application will be deployed. So you have to make sure that your application exposes only the ports that are required, and you don't end up exposing entire application to the world, because there are lot many hackers and that kind of community active. You don't even realize that the importance of this software unless your site is hacked. Okay, so you have to make sure that you kind of add sufficient security rules, firewall rules around your application, so that it's difficult for anybody to expose that. So typical example is that your database should never be exposed to public network. Your application, the front end should only talk to the API gateway to talk to the service, and service only should talk to the databases. So those kind of rules you have to have in place so that your application is secured and it's well protected. There are tools which will do all of this analysis, and these tools have to be integrated with your build and deployment pipeline so that all these checks are triggered automatically. So that's one of the areas. You also make sure that you look for all the patches, that security patches that come with any of the packages that you use. Since you are using a lot of open source tools, you have to also look for vulnerabilities that exist in particular version of an application or the package, and you have to consistently patch them against those vulnerabilities. So those kind of things you have to look for, and you can always build tools around that and add that as part of your software development lifecycle. The next area is the cloud migration. We talked about the applications which are hosted on premise. So there are migrations wherein people would want to move their applications uh, from their private hosted data centers to cloud, or there can be a cloud to cloud migration. Say, for example, if an application was once hosted in AWS, but for some reason I see that the AWS is not cost effective. I would prefer it to be running on Azure. So I would want to move that or migrate that application to a different cloud. So I should be able to, and that would include like if there are any cloud dependent things that I'm using, I should be able to understand the alternative that are exist in the other target cloud that I have, so that I can make those change to the application and I can make the migration easy. So that's another factor, that another area that you can explore. And what that needs is like you have to have thorough understanding of all the clouds, all the limitations, all the features that exist in the different clouds, and what are the pricing when you should make the migration, those kind of things. The similar thing is required for solution architecting. What services are available in what particular cloud? Yeah, I should be able to provide a solution based on the feature that I'm looking at, and I should be able to suggest which cloud's offering I should go for, whether I should build that particular service or I should consume that service from a cloud provider. So that's what the solution architect would do. The last thing is like the monitoring and support. Uh, the application development doesn't stop once your application is developed and deployed. You have to also make sure that you consistently monitor the deployment, and there are tools that come with cloud providers which will help you take stock of what is your current infrastructure usage, whether you are getting a lot of hits, whether you should scale your thing or not, what kind of analytics you want to do on the logs that you're collecting. Those are things that you can build based on whatever you deploy or build to it. So there is a other set of tools that you can use or you can expertise on, so that you will help monitor your application and create some kind of analytics dashboard on top of it. So that's another area that cloud specific which you can look for and explore. So this is in terms of the opportunities that exist. I'll stop for a minute. I think I spoke for a long time. Are there any questions at this point? Any of you have? Hello? Is there anyone there?
And I guess no questions, Sudhakar.
Right, thank you. Yeah, so we talked about, I know this was a lot of technical stuff, but I thought it would be good from the awareness perspective. Whenever you start working on any of the projects that you are working, try to make sure that these things exist. Don't try to build everything from scratch. You can also make use of things which are available that will fasten your solution. So even whenever you're building your code for your internal projects, try to see you can build an entire end-to-end solution and not just spend time in something which is already available, but the value that you're adding has to be unique. So the focus should be on the problem statement and getting it working end to end. In order to prepare yourself into this area, you have to be, you should focus on these uh, subjects or topics while from the curriculum. There is a difference in the way engineer approaches a solution or a problem versus any non-engineer, and this is what should this is what increases the value of an engineer in industry. Otherwise, any graduate can do the stuff. I don't need engineers, and the reason the technical companies would prefer engineers is because I would expect you guys come up with all these things already known. I don't have to teach you guys when you are in the industry. So the things that are important are like data structures and algorithm. One programming language, you don't need to learn C, C++, Java, Golang, Python, Node.js, anything. You don't need to learn everything. At the end of the day, it's all syntax, but you should know what, if I call a function, what happens, how can I optimize my calling, whenever I do a for loop, what is an impact of that when I'm writing a for loop versus while loop? Is there any performance impact? Is there any impact if I write long functions, if I like short functions? Those kind of things you should know and you should work on. Understand those things rather than just writing a code just for the sake of it. Uh, it becomes important because performance, as you see, these things are the workloads are executed in the cloud. You don't even know which data center it is being executed, what is the network latency. So you have to make sure that your program runs efficiently so that even if the network latency is high, your application is not impacted because of that. So it has a minimal impact. It doesn't spend like 5 seconds in the network and then 10 seconds in executing that request in the cloud. That kind of thing should not happen. Anything that you feel that a response can be like 1 second, all I'm talking about is like 6 second response, worst case. So those kind of factors become important when you are to make sure we are writing the code which will be executed in the cloud. So concepts of networking are important because you have to make sure that the application is reachable. If it is not working, where I should look for if I'm not able to contact one service or the other service. What is a firewall? How do I turn it on, off? How do I make sure that the port is working properly or not? Those kind of factors you will understand or you will have the knowledge only if you know that, okay, these things exist and this can be a problem and not just writing a code. So these will help you in debugging any of the practical things that you get into, and it will help you in all of that. The other thing that is equally important is not just your technical knowledge, but your soft skill and communication. Because even if you have a lot of knowledge, if you're not able to talk about that, the other person from the other person perspective, it's as if you don't know anything. So it's important that you have to have confidence by learning all of that. And you should have you should also have the confidence of explaining whatever knowledge that you have gained so that other person also believes you and trusts you with the work that he wants to assign it to you. So work on the communication skills, and communication doesn't necessarily mean just speaking. It also means listening skills as well, so that you understand the question thoroughly without jumping on to answering the questions. So that's one aspect that I've seen during the interviews, like people don't listen or don't hear the question completely, and they feel that they know the answer and they just try to answer it as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, with as many as jargons as possible. That doesn't work. You should know what you're talking. You should understand the question completely and only then try to answer it. That will have a better impact in terms of your communication. Um, the one other aspect that I want to emphasize is contribution to open source projects, Stack Overflow, and the public forums that exist. Uh, right now, many of you, whenever you get into any problem, you will search on Google, you will try to find answer, and most of the time you will get answer in Stack Overflow, or you will download some kind of a library which is open source. But you don't try to contribute, and if you run into one issue, you will just give up on that. If you find an answer in Stack Overflow, you don't kind of give a feedback. Okay, this solution is working or this solution is not working. But when I tried this additional thing, it worked for me. Try to build kind of a social profile for yourself, so that at any point in time, if you can give reference to your GitHub link where you kind of wrote so many projects, these are the things that you have consistently worked on, these are the forums you actively participated on, uh, these are the open source projects you contributed to. That gives the interviewer enough confidence that okay, you are serious about doing something. So in the industries like product based companies, wherein these people would value these things more than like 1 hour interview that you may have in that, because it's not possible to cover all of these things in 1 hour. So we try to touch upon all the basic things of data structures, programming, database, all those factors. But if you say that, okay, these are my this is my GitHub link, these are my contributions, these are the projects where I actively contributed, I actively participated, people feel confident, and this is not like built overnight. You are making a consistent effort towards that, so that we get a confidence that you kind of serious about your career and you are doing something on your own. That will help you. Uh, that will build your profile more, and that's something which you can do while time is at your hand. Don't do it like in the last year of your last semester, or like third year or sixth semester. Do it consistently so that you build a career, you build a history in all of that. That will be a very impressive resume to share it with anyone. And last but not the least, continuously learn something. Don't just stop just because you know one thing. You should never stop learning, because this is not like these things will keep coming. There will be tools every other day. So you can't stop like just because I know Angular, I'll stop it. There is React, there is Vue, there are other frameworks which will keep coming. So you can't just stop just because you know one thing. So keep learning, be consistent. And at the last, I just want to leave one thought with you guys. Uh, we talked about many free uh, packages or resources available. Uh, Take a conscious call whether you want to work for yourself or you want to work for somebody else. That is, you want to be an entrepreneur or you want to work for somebody else. There are drawbacks, there are positives, benefits of both the approaches. Give it a thought, be serious about your career if you really want to do it. Uh, and that will, the results that you have if you choose one path or the other, there is a huge difference when you see the actual results. And believe me, creating a company is not that easy, but it's not that difficult as well. You have to have that resolve and you have to have that consistency. You have to know that, okay, what you're doing, you're really creating a value and you are serious about it. Only then you go for building a startup. Otherwise, it's any run of the mill job wherein you get consistent salary at the end of the day, end of the month. But believe me, the thrill may not be that much. You may not have enough control on what technologies you want to work on, what kind of areas that you will get to work with. It may not be of your choice, but it would be of somebody else's choice. So it's a conscious call that you have to make, and then take the risk. And if you feel that you have enough risk appetite and you have enough things to support that risk, you can go for the other option as well. That's something which I'll leave it up to you guys. If you at any point in time, if you feel you need any kind of guidance, feel free to reach out to your alumni, your professors. They will guide you whether it makes sense to have that or not, because around 99% of the startups usually fail. Okay, so uh, it's something which is exciting. At the same time, it depends on whether you want to take the route or not. Okay, but at the end, I just want to leave it that thought with you. That's an option. Not everybody needs to look for a job, but they can create jobs. Okay. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. If there are any questions, feel free to ask. And it
Yes,
might be too overwhelming,
Yes.
but yeah, go ahead.
Sir, I want to a question that if I qualify a test of any company, then in that company, how many other jobs that I grab if I am not good in coding?
So it depends. It's not like there are, see, the way it works is like once you start your career, you will be put on to the projects which are available, or the technologies which the company feels are important. You will be trained on that, and then accordingly you will be put on to the projects. The typical period the industry expect a person to spend on a single project is like 18 months, like 1.5 years to 2 years. Each company will have different uh, yardsticks, but typical timeline is like 18 months. That is enough time for you to understand the project, understand what is required, gain expertise, and then be, I would say, deliver on that project. And once that is done, if you feel that you can do better in other things, there are internal job postings which are available, and there is a process. It's not like just because you want to do something, you will be given a switch. Uh, First, your manager has to approve it. Then the manager who is hiring you has to approve that, and then that goes through. But there are different companies will have different policies, but that's a typical process that is followed in most of the organization. I'm talking about service based. If it's a product based, then you can, it's usually a smaller organization wherein you kind of know different teams, different modules that have been worked on, and then you can talk to that particular module lead, and you can tell him that, okay, this is what I want. And one thing you have to realize, just because I want to do something, people are not going to give you that opportunity. You have to show that I have done this for my liking, and these are the things that I've done on my own, because it's a paid job. So people are not going to give you salary just because you would like something. Okay, so you have to be serious, take some extra effort to learn and showcase why you want to do that kind of job. Show the passion, that will help your case better. So you can do that. Does that answer your question?
And then after a few, yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
If I joined one company, then after few months, I got another opportunity in other company, and I got job there. So in first company, there is a month, I think 6 month that I have to told that I want to resign. But sir, I want to join just now. For that time, that 6 month later or resign before that I want to don't tell to the company. So in that situation, what I do means I
Actually,
can't leave
you're
that company
talking,
also. I want to join that company.
you're talking too far in future. I think you will get to know that there are different ways to do that, but I think don't have to worry about it right now.
Okay, sir.
Any other questions? Any of you want to start your own company, or have you given it a thought? Any other questions anyone has?
Yeah, audience, the forum is open for you. Please grab this opportunity to interact with the resource person.
Was it too overwhelming?
No, sir, nothing like that.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Actually, it's not a question, but actually, session is very good, and we can easily convince. Actually, I am working as a faculty, so it's very easy to convince all the students. Like whatever topics you have covered, like all subjects are necessary, like networking and then programming language and data structures and soft skill. So actually it is very good कि we can easily convince students कि don't focus on only programming languages and coding part. So you have to focus on all the areas. So it's good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so I think one other factor is like I said, communication is important. So because all of you are like remote, I can't see the expressions. If somebody asks you something, you can just say that yes, no, that will give you that, okay, there is some kind of a presence. People are listening to you, they're understanding it or not understanding it. It's okay to say that you haven't understood, or you can say that you have understood, but there has to be some communication. Okay. Any other question that I can answer may not be from this session itself, but in general, any general queries that you may have.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, what is SEO, means software engineering optimization? Is there any career in SEO?
SEO is search engine optimization, right?
Yes, ha.
Search engine optimization is typically what you do is like whenever you kind of see, the idea is that your website should be ranked top whenever anyone wants to search it. Okay, so what you do it is like you kind of add some kind of a keywords in the pages that are served from your website, so that there are a lot many people, the traffic is more towards your website and your ranking of your website is constantly up. So what you do it is like you add those search terms, or you add those terms in the pages. The clear identification of like what is your target audience for your website, that will help you plan those terms. Say for example, if somebody is looking for uh, electronic goods, okay, I want to make sure that people searching for electronic goods should come to my website. That's how my sale would be more. Okay, if I'm launching a education site for, let's say, specifically to data structures or anything, I should be able to tap on these terms which are used by the people to search for a specific thing, so that will drive traffic more towards my organization or my website. That's how my ranking will improve, my website visibility will improve, and all of that. And that is what is called as search engine optimization uh, in general. So there is a career, but it's like you have to have a lot of market research to come up with and understand what is the key proposition of the website or the portal that you're building, and make those changes to the application or the web pages. That is what is search engine optimization.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
How is the work culture for the freshers in IT company?
What do you mean by freshers? Work culture? So it's like, see, industry is like pretty open and usually accepts freshers easily. It also is like pretty ruthless when you spend one year in the organization. You have to make sure that you can make mistakes initially. You're allowed to make mistakes because you're freshers, but you should not repeat the mistakes regularly. Okay, if you people see that this guy is not learning from your mistakes, he's always looking for help with the others. Initially, people might help you, but in the long run, they may not. Okay, because I would expect you to learn by this time because you are new. Initially, you are new. You did not know a lot of things. So I did handholding. I provide you all the required support. I taught you a lot of things, but you are again coming to me with the same questions without spending anything. The kind of thing that usually helps or uh, people like is that before you approach anyone with a problem, go with some kind of a homework that, okay, I face this problem. I have tried these 2, 3 things, and I also tried this 4, 5 things, but these 3 things work, but the next 4, 5 things did not work. So what should I do next? If you go with that kind of study, people will be more willing to answer you or help you because they know that you have done the required homework. Instead of just telling that, okay, I tried this, I'm facing this problem, it's not working. Can somebody help me? That kind of attitude doesn't help. And it's true for everyone, not just because you're freshers, it's true for any experienced person as well. Everybody would like the attitude wherein person spends some time, understands this. Uh, it also means that you don't take like weeks together to solve this problem without informing the other person. Critical thing is like you should communicate. If you are running into a problem, you should give the realistic status that, okay, I am currently working on this uh, and I should be able to get some kind of a headway by next day. And if I am not able to make any progress, I will get in touch with somebody who can help me with that. So that's the kind of attitude I would expect from a fresher, and that's the attitude which people should have. Just because you are fresher can give you some kind of a benefit of doubt for some period, but not for a long time. So be self-reliant, be self-sufficient, and be open, be communicative, so that and be realistic. Don't sugarcoat just because you have been given a problem. You don't want to say that you have not you are not understood the problem. Just saying that I will do it tomorrow, day after tomorrow. If you have not understood, be upfront and tell that you have not understood. Can somebody explain that? Then get a solution from them that, okay, I've tried this and this is what I have done so far, and I would like more help to make complete progress for this. So that will give you better acceptance from anyone. But otherwise, industry is pretty open, and we like people talking to each other because we can't talk to the computers all the day. So we want human interaction as well.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, there is a question from one student.
Yes.
What is the company expects from the fresher?
Yeah, so as I said, I wouldn't expect a lot from a fresher, but at least if you are a computer science graduate, I would expect you to know what is the difference between array and a map. Okay, I don't want you to teach all of this, but beyond that, I know that you will not know the domain. You will not know a lot of other stuff like how certain things will operate, what kind of documentation tools that you use, any of the other product specific thing which we are building or which you are working with. I wouldn't expect you to know all of that, but at least if you're done computer science engineering, I would expect you to know basic programming and some kind of understanding of uh, like what's the data structure, which data structure should I use in what situation, what is the efficiency of any of the algorithm that you're trying and all that. And those are the factors that I would expect. I won't I don't have to teach you that, okay, once I write the code, I have to compile it or build it or run it and all that. Those basic stuff you should know.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Um, Sir, in companies when they come in colleges for students hiring for jobs, then
Mhm.
what thing they require? Like what is trending nowadays? Which language the students should know
So,
the most for IT
so
companies?
yeah, so one of the factors that I have noticed is like nowadays, uh, if I ask any student what is your area of interest, everybody says machine learning and AI. But believe me, this is just a part of it. Uh, Many companies know what are the areas that they are looking at, what are the kind of customers that they are hiring. If you are going for if the company is service based company, they know what kind of customers that they are expecting, what type of project they might be getting, which is it like a development project in Java, Golang, Python, or any of these, or it's a testing project, or it's a deployment, what kind of uh, business pipeline that I have, and accordingly the hiring is done. But in a bigger organization, it's not specifically to per customer. It basically uh, I want to train people into these many people into front end, these many people into back end, these many people into some other area, so that I have a balanced pool available with me to build a team. Whenever I get a customer, I should be able to build a pool, build a team from this pool, and they can be productive, and I should be able to deploy them on any of the projects. So it's not like one language or one thing that uh, I would prefer person to study. The things that I would expect is like whatever projects you are working on, it should be working. You should be knowing what you have done, why you have done. You should talk about what data structures have you used in the project, why have you used, what kind of codes have you used. Uh, if you talk about that, that gives me more. Yeah, that's more important for me than telling me that it measures the number of sit-ups that a person has done by measuring, processing this image and all that kind of stuff. Because that's a business thing. I may not be that much interested because the use case that you have worked on may not be valid anymore for my perspective. For me, what is important is uh, how do you go about solving that problem programmatically? What tools have you used? What data structures have you used? What algorithms have you used? Why did you went for Python versus why did you go for Java? Why did you go for Golang or any of the other languages? So you should be able to talk about those kind of decisions. That gives me confidence that you have thought through the process, not just because Python is easier for me, I went for Python. And like I said, once you know one programming language thoroughly, switching to other languages easy. I wouldn't say that it's automatic, but it's easier. And the companies might or will train you sufficiently to pick up the language if you don't know by now. Okay, I wouldn't expect you to know all the languages anyways.
Yes, sir. Sir, and one more thing that as you said that you should always be realistic as you are a fresher, and then during that time when companies hiring new people for freshers during job,
Mhm.
then if that students are not having good technical skills, but apart from that, if they're having good soft skills or you know serious hard worker, then on behalf of that, can they get hired in a company or in an IT company?
No, it depends. It's like if you don't know technical stuff, see there are if you look at the team composition, not everybody is a star performer. Okay, you always have a bell curve. There are some laggards, there are some average people, there are some star performers. That's how the team is built. Okay, so the smart talking and everything can take you up to an extent. I wouldn't say it is not required, but it also has a limitations when it comes to uh, critical assessment. When I get to a comparison of critically assessing two people within my team, everything is taken into consideration. It depends on what organization you are getting into, and that there your fate will be different. If it's a big organization wherein you are like one person among a team of 100, uh, the chances are that you will not be noticed for your technical lack or any of these things. But if it's a small team of 5 people, those things will get noticed immediately. So it depends what you're getting into. At the same time, what you should do it is like, just because you are not good technically, don't remain at that state forever. You have to learn, you have to improve on that. Otherwise, you will have always have a limitation for your growth. So you have to identify your weaknesses and work on them so that you are a better person. Because once you will not be in the company forever. When you go for a different job, people will expect you to have that kind of knowledge. Say, for example, the typical saying is that whenever I hire a 5-year person, I would expect that person to be 5 years experience rather than 1 year experience 5 times. Okay. Because if you keep doing the same thing again and again, all you're doing it is like 1 year experience, but 5 times that. So you're not grown as much as a 5 years person. So that will impact you in a long run for sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So there is one more question. Tell us about entrepreneur approach towards IT industry.
Okay. So whenever you're saying you're entrepreneur, that means you have a solid idea. Uh, the idea is like it has to be unique, it has to be practical. There has to be a market available for that idea. There has to be consumers who are ready to buy to that particular idea. Just because you felt that this idea is brilliant, but there is nobody to pay for that idea. That doesn't make sense to uh, pursue that idea. But if you feel that this idea is good, you have seen lot many people struggle with it. People might be willing to pay money for that. And this idea need not be just a software idea. It can be from anything that you see around you, say agriculture, or you can say your uh, training that you're going through, or any education domain, any of your neighborhood shops. If lot many people are saying that, okay, this is, I'm facing this, can something will be built around that. You can have that idea, you can build something on that, try to make sure that you talk about it to the first thing that you should do it is like check if a solution already exists for this problem or not. If it exists, try to see whatever you are thinking, whether it's there is a unique proposition for your idea or not. If there is nothing unique about our idea, either in terms of feature or in terms of price, there is no point, no, people will not buy that. That's a given. Okay, so you have to always think that, okay, what kind of market that this idea may have. Then you can look for what kind of resources that I may need for that. Also, in terms of how I can monetize my idea. I should be knowing that, okay, just because I have some idea, I should be able to monetize this particular idea so that people can buy it, people can feel it affordable. Once you have done through, the next step is to get some kind of an investor who can invest in your idea so that you can build some kind of a POC. And the next step is to get VC, venture capitalist funding, which can then, wherever you feel that you need a lot of investment, where you want to take it to a larger audience before you can get profitable. So you always have to make sure you build a POC, show it to somebody, get some funding, build something on that using the money that you want, go for a VC funding. And once that is done, that's the next level. So that's the typical journey of any idea. But critical thing to look at is like always critically look at what you call a brilliant idea, because just having a brilliant idea is not good enough. You also have to have financial backing to that. Okay, if it is not selling, a brilliant product is of no use. Okay. Yeah. Does that answer?
Hello, sir.
I mean, it's a different topic altogether, but that's a gist of it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Somebody else had a question?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Hello, sir. Sir, companies like Capgemini, Wipro, and Infosys, TCS are hiring all the branches students like mechanical, electrical from all branches. So, sir, they are going to do the same work all students, or there is a different work for each branch? And specify
So-
work?
So those kind of companies typically have a 3 to 6 months of training. In the training, they will cover the entire life cycle, entire thing that I talked about, entire spectrum of technologies, and then they will choose. But as a comp science graduate, you always have an edge above them, and you also have to make use of that. And you should take that as an opportunity that anything that they're doing like in 1 week, you should be able to deliver that in 2 days. That's a challenge that you should take as a comp science graduate. Otherwise, there is no use of you learning computer science. So you have a head start on them. That's what I would say. As a comp science engineer, those will have head start, but that doesn't mean that they can rest on that forever, because people will catch up. There will be some bright student from other branches also who will pick up things faster. So you have to always be competitive and relevant. Other than if you are not relevant, then you will be replaced.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any last question? I think we are overrun by on the time. Any other questions anyone has? I can take one more question.
Yeah, there is a question
Sir,
in the
is
box.
there any? Hello,
Yeah,
sir.
go ahead.
Sir, is there any academic results matters in the company, sir?
It
Or
it
taking
just
the job?
tells no, it tells you that okay, this person is little bit serious than the others. Other than that, it's okay. Meaning academic results won't matter that much. If your work on the project delivery is good enough, the academics is forgotten after the first year, I would say.
Sir, there is one more. There is one more question. What is the use of big data analysis?
So what happens is like I talked about all the logging analytics that on everything that you do. So big data analytics is typically used in my decisions that I'm making. Big data helps me in understanding my customers better. Say for example, if I see that there is a pattern of see it's like if certain user is buying, so you can see that there are, if you look at Amazon website, you always see that uh, the recommendations, if you buy some product, you can say that, okay, people who have bought this also bought these other items. Okay, how does these recommendation come through? Those typically happen through the analysis of purchase history of all the other customers. Uh, that's one factor. So that's just one example of big data analytics. Typically also, like say for example, if there is a there is an event that's happening, cricket match that is happening in the near the stadium, which is like far away from the city. But I know that there might be a match going on there. I want to make sure that the cell tower around that area is provisioned sufficiently for that time. I should be able to do trend analysis based on everything that I gather, based on the history of uh, data that I gather, and big data analytics comes into that. It helps in converting my data to the information and information to knowledge. That is where my big data analytics comes into picture. So because I can look at a log file, it's just a raw text. It doesn't matter. But if I say that, okay, after every 10 seconds, I see this log message repeating, that's an information. But if I say that, okay, because it's repeating 10 seconds and from this 10 second, every 10 seconds, I'm running this cron job and that might be causing this error every 10 seconds. That's a knowledge that I've gained based on my analysis of this data. So, and you have to do all of this analytics programmatically. That is where the big data analytics comes into picture. Because you're talking about a huge volume, not just single log file which manually can be looked at by any person. So you need to know a lot of mathematics and other things. So it is everything that you do. There has to be analytics done at the end of it, because you want to consistently improve your product, and that's one area which will help me understand the user acceptance of my product. So that's why big data is required, or analytics.
Yeah, Sudhakar, I think we are running out of time.
Yeah,
So
that's what I thought.
we need to proceed
Okay,
for the
if
vote
there
of
are no
thanks.
more questions, thank you. Thanks for your time. It was nice talking to you. I hope you guys are benefited in some way. If there is the content is more, or if there is something which you have not understood, feel free to reach out to me. I can help answer those questions.
Yeah, Samiksha, you please proceed for vote of thanks.
Yes, sir. First of all, I must say we have been fortunate enough to hear from such an experienced personality. I hope everyone has no doubt left in their minds. A big thank you to Mr. Sudhakar Shenoy, sir,
No,
for
never
their
say that.
time and efforts.
If people don't have doubts, that means there is a problem. You should always be inquisitive about things so that you can learn more. That's how you will learn.
Yes, sir. So, thank you to you, sir. Today's webinar was full of knowledge and informative things. It gave deep insights into expectations of IT industry from fresh graduation or fresh graduates. Once again, I would like to thank Mr. Sudhakar Shenoy, sir, for taking out time for us and enlightening us with the right path. I would take the opportunity to thank all the college dignitaries for their time. Special thanks to our webinar coordinator, Dr. Suhas Sapate, sir, for organizing this session. Thank you to all participants of today's webinar for their cooperation, and hereby I declare this as end of the session. Good luck for your future and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Okay, good day.
Thank you, sir.
So, and one